What are you doing here with the camera on and pointed in the exact direction of me? How smooth. Anyway, so I'm trying something new out. Let's see what the fuck happens. Anyway, yeah. So if you know one thing about me, one of my big passions is writing. And I've had some good moments, had some successes in my time. But one thing that also really interests me is psychology, particularly how the human mind works, what drives us, why we do the things we do. And one of the main things I've gathered actually is how much psychology really drives storytelling. I mean, if you think about the reasons why we tell stories in the first place, it's to help carry on useful information about the human experience for next generations in a way that interests them and keeps their attention. A lot of writers forget that. But yeah, I mean, the biggest problem I always hear with writers, new or old, is they get stuck in an idea, or they get an idea and they can't get it off the ground. They can't think of what happens next or what this character would do or anything like that. And I think the answer for that is psychology. Because once you understand the mind, once you understand what humans do and why they do it, it just seeps in the story. It becomes natural, And, a lot of people, I think, would think of it as like writing like formulaically, like, oh, you're just writing in XYZ ABC in order to grab their attention, like you're using some sort of mind trick or whatever. But no, it's not like that. It's just retaining information. It's just really just simple. It's just how we work as humans. So basically, if you want to talk about really the three best psychologists in the form of, or I guess the realm of storytelling, your three are going to be Carl Jung, who does his works on archetypes and the collective unconscious. That's really, he's the godfather. He's the main honcho. And then there's Erik Erikson, who I've recently been getting into, and his works on the theory of psychosocial stages of development. And then finally, Big Papi, Sigmund Freud, dreams. Gotta have those dreams, right? Metaphor, simile. Alright, let's go check this out. That way. Okay, yeah, alright. Let's do this.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's important to understand psychology not just from a storytelling aspect, but as a science as a whole. Both writer and psychologist are professions that are about delving into and understanding the human mind and experience, like I said before. Movies, novels, any piece of literature are really basically therapy for a lot of people. Stories help people either escape their own lives by living out other fantasies they have, or help process things that they may be experiencing themselves, but maybe can't really talk about it to other people. But then they see it in a movie and they think, wow, I'm not alone here. There's at least one other person that gets what I'm going through. And that feeling of connection, you strive for those moments, and sometimes you get there by sheer luck or by dramatizing your own situations. But the most reliable and consistent way is by a deep understanding of the human psyche. And you couple that with your own experiences, maybe just life experience, and you got one hell of a writing tool.
I'm sorry I have to wake you. You a doctor?
That's right.
We have some passengers that are very sick. Could you come?
I think the psychologist whose concepts best relate to storytelling is Carl Jung and his work on the archetypes and the collective unconscious. Now, if you're a writer, you've probably heard of these terms before. Archetypes, from Carl Jung's own book, to quote, is essentially an unconscious content that is altered by becoming conscious and by being perceived, and it takes its color from the individual consciousness in which it happens to appear. In layman's terms, it's a reoccurring symbol, motif, theme that is present in all of our unconsciousness that is then manifested in our conscious in a way that matches our own cultures and beliefs. Things like the pranksters, the wise old man, tree of life are all very common ones. There, of course, might be slight variations on physical aspects and their role within the society, but that's just to be expected. We usually project these archetypes into our literature, art, and religion because of the common use of unlocking our subconscious and our thoughts when creating a certain type of, I guess for lack of a better word, ecstasy of understanding. When you write and do this sort of stuff, the two go hand in hand.
Give me that old time.
What makes archetypes important as a writer is our universal understanding of them. Every person in every culture knows what a prankster is. They may have a different word for it, but no matter where you go in the world, the essence of what a prankster is understood. This all directly leads into the collective unconscious. It goes hand in hand with archetypes. It's why Carl Jung believed archetypes are so universally understood. Carl Jung believed all humans shared an unconscious understanding of certain things, morals, beliefs, symbols, and every human is basically born with this understanding, buried deep in their psyches or their subconscious. I mean, when you really think about it, it's not that far-fetched of an idea. I mean, so many religions draw on so many of the same facts. Most have similar prophets, most have similar laws, or morals, as they call them in religion. And these are cultures and people thousands and thousands of miles apart with no contact with each other. And yet they're coming up with the same ideas, just dressed up differently. You really expect us to believe that's just by coincidence? Understanding all this as a writer helps you understand the universal connection within all people. Some people are just, lack of a better word, just born with it. People like J.K. Rowling are just, they just have this innate ability, this intangible creativity in them that allows them to create fantasy worlds like Harry Potter, a story that is filled with archetypes and motifs. Erik Erikson was a German-American psychologist and psychoanalyst born in 1902 and died in 1994. Although he had a storied career in the field with a lot of accomplishments, things like he coined the phrase identity crisis. For the sake of this video, I'm going to focus on one theory of his, the stages of psychosocial development. This theory identifies a series of 8 stages that a healthy developing individual should go through from infancy to late adulthood. Each stage has a psychosocial crisis that consists of biological attributes versus a socio-cultural attribute. Man, this is a lot of big words. The individual must reconcile and do battle, quote unquote, with these, and whatever attribute the individual favors, quote unquote, accompanies them to the next stage of life. Here's an example. In adolescence, age 13 to 19, The psychosocial crisis they go through is identity versus role confusion. The virtue you get after conquering this stage is fidelity, or the ability to have fidelity in your life. He also has another factor that helps guide the individual. He calls this the significant relationship. For each one, the person who will help you the most in achieving this virtue. There's also the existential question for each stage. This one being, who am I? Who can I be? Now, as a storyteller, this all probably looks very familiar to you. For each stage, there is a conflict that the hero, the individual, must choose in order to gain something they didn't have before. What helps guide them morally throughout are certain characters, quote unquote, or people, and a theme, or the existential question. The whole theory mirrors perfectly what we as writers are trying to achieve: a sense of conflict, morality, supporting characters that help us. Theme, it's all there. It's almost uncanny how close it resembles it. In stories, there are usually a number of conflicts, but at least one that puts the protagonist in opposition of some other force. Any writer knows that conflict is the heart that drives your story. If you've seen my earlier video on A Bug's Life, you saw my X versus Y scale, which helps screenwriters in identifying their story's conflicts and where their characters land on either side of that conflict. Erikson uses two traits that oppose each other as well. He calls it the psychosocial crisis. You must learn about and deal with these during that stage in order to achieve the virtue you need in life. Notice the word need instead of want. In both psychology and storytelling, those words are very important. A want in stories are usually surface level items or goals that are vain, kind of similar to in real life. A need, on the other hand, in story is what usually the protagonist gets after his quest. They most likely didn't set out to gain this, but after the change that they have been through, they are glad to have it. This is similar to Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. If one during a certain stage does the thing they are required of them at that point, usually by establishing proper and healthy relationships with certain people, or as he calls it, the significant relationship of this stage, not unlike the characters that help protagonists on their journeys, you achieve a virtue that you need. You most likely didn't even know you acquired this virtue until later on in life, but you are happy to have it. All these fall under the umbrella of the existential question being asked in that stage of life. We storytellers like to call that theme. If everything mentioned above was left unresolved, Erikson believed it would cause massive psychosociological harm to oneself, until otherwise confronted or treated. Erikson's theory of psychosocial development helps us as writers understand that people relate and gravitate to stories so much because of how much they mirror the conflicts or crises in our lives, and how we go about solving them or suffering the consequences if we... Sigmund Freud. Although his work may have the least connection with storytelling, his works on subconscious, ego, and dreams help lay the groundwork for people understanding how humans operate, something that is pretty useful to know as a writer. Freud believed that dreams were gateways into the inner reachings of our mind, showing us our deepest desires, mostly sexual. His theory, even today, gets debated fiercely about the validity of his claims. I can say I thought I had dreams that were trying to tell me or show me something I couldn't see or understand myself. But I also had lots of dreams that just seemed to be a random assortment of neurons putting faces, places, and events together to help stimulate my mind into being awake soon. Yet, without dreams, we wouldn't have some of the world's greatest literature. The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson, Misery by Stephen King, Frankenstein by Larry Shelley, and Zone 1 by Colson Whitehead. Notice anything in common? All seem to be in the genre of horror, which I guess shouldn't be a surprise. For most people, our most recognizable and common dreams are actually nightmares, usually a confrontation of some sort of beast or monster. Jung would call this a manifestation of our shadow. Something that left unchecked can plague us. I think some, not all, dreams are a calling of our subconscious to our conscious. The subconscious is trying to warn us to check something, confront it, because it's eating the subconscious alive, and next is going to be the conscious. Once again, we can relate all of this to story. The hero's journey, a common form of storytelling that follows specific plot points, in short, is usually about a hero who leaves his village to go slay a dragon or beast, a conflict or burden hurting them or one close to it, metaphorically. He must journey to the darkest parts of the world and conquer all challenges on the way. Once he gets there and slays the dragon, he gets the dragon's gold and returns to the village, a hero. Now, all this can be seen as a metaphor for the human mind. In order for us to grow and learn new things about ourselves, or possibly get over dark things in our past, we must travel to places in our mind that make us uncomfortable at first, but upon confronting them, we learn things about ourselves we may not have learned before. We then return to our regular day-to-day life. The new set of ideals, though. Yes. Alright, guys. Hope you enjoyed that little travel into the human mind. You know, blue, mind, of course, right? What else could it be? Alright, degenerates, I got a couple quick book recommendations for you. Carl Jung's The Archetype and the Collective Unconscious, translated by R.F.C. Whole, Bible. The Interpretation of Dreams by Sigmund Freud, second Bible. And this one, not as much Bible, but still, if you plan on marketing yourself or, you know, basically the stuff you gotta do. Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, Robert B. Cialdini, Ph.D. Alright, that's it. Oh, yes. Check out my WordPress and my new Medium. Got some articles up, I'll put in the description. Alright, guys. Subscribe, please, and peace out from